Hey, Money Multipliers. Welcome back to another episode of the Money Multiplier podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Kessler, and we ask ourselves, do our dollars make sense? I have the pleasure of sitting down with Mr. Chris Naugle today, and I'm in a new setting. This is his amazing studio up here in Buffalo. So I just feel honored to even be sitting here in this amazing leather chair and being able to chit-chat with him. So Chris, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Chris, I want to ask you, since seeing you last, you had your place in the mall, and since coming over here, how's it been different? Do you feel a lot better now since you have everything all set up? It's kind of your space.
I love it, yeah. This was kind of a labor of love, if you will. This was kind of like all of our ideas coming to actually be. And the way that we found this building is pretty ironic. I was doing business with the guy that owned this. Matter of fact, he asked me to come out and teach him about like the infinite banking concept and talk to him and his partner. And when I was here, I was just like, this is an amazing office. You know, it doesn't look like you're using it much because there was nobody in here. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, we do most of our work from our facility, you know, where we do all the forklifts, and he's like, we just have this, you know, 1 or 2 times a week, our sales team's here, but yeah, we don't do much with it. And I'm like, well, you should sell it to me. And he says, no, my wife's going to use it for this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, all right, well, hey, if you ever want to sell it, let me know. He never called me, but I did call him back, and I said, hey, I'm serious, like, what would it take for me to buy this? And, you know, obviously everything has a price, so he throws this huge price. I'm like, whoa, woo, I don't know if I want it that bad. But we ended up negotiating it on my terms. I gave him his price, but my terms, and it came to be. And an interesting thing about this that I like, very different. I loved my old offices, don't get me wrong, but my old offices had no windows. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So I had no concept of time it was. I'd usually get there before the sun came up and leave before the sun, you know, or when the sun was down. So here, I don't know if you noticed up, and it's 2 buildings. Like we're in the studio, which is garages that we converted into studio and also a nice place to hold the cars. Oh. But up front, we have windows.
Yeah.
And Cash loves the windows. So like that's one of the best things about it. It's kind of a different look and feel than what we had before. It's more upscale, more of what I wanted it to look like. And all the little elements just gave us the creative freedom to build it.
In my opinion, it's more your vibe too.
You think so?
Yeah, it's more your aesthetic.
Cool. Well, yeah.
I mean, your aesthetic is like the color black, but you know.
I know. I didn't. Today, of course, the day that I'm not in all black, I'm kind of like having this complex with this shirt. It's just so soft and warm.
It's a good one for winter. That's a good one for winter too. Hey, talk to me about this too. Cash, how old is Cash now?
5.
5. He's 5 years old.
5 years old.
Wow, wow. And he's a lover too.
He is, but when he was a kitten, he would have tore your leg off. Matter of fact, many of the staff, they've got war wounds from Cash. He was not a nice kitty cat.
No, I love just being here. And so I'm going to be coming up a lot more throughout this year and as we progress into building the empire of the Money Multiplier. So very blessed to know you and lucky to be on this journey with you. And today we're going to be diving deep into really family banking, generational wealth, family banking. I want to go into stories of how did we get here? You know, a lot of people know our backgrounds, but I just even want to go deeper today. So I'm excited to sit down and chat with you for a little bit.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. And you know, I don't know how much you know about those humble early days because you weren't even in the business at that time. You were just young. You know,
I saw dreadlocks.
Yeah, rock star over at Cracker Barrel with dreadlocks. Yeah, so. It'll be fun. Yeah, let's dive into that humble beginnings of how this all began. Let me start with like where I actually met you. I remember I met your parents. We were talking, you know, actually, let me go even one step further back. So I learned about the infinite banking concept from none other than Mike Baird. And you remember him. So I was meeting with him in Cheesecake Factory out in Utah, pitching him a deal that I needed to borrow money from. And I just asked him, I said, so how do you lend all this money? And I thought for sure he was going to say his self-directed IRA. And he said, I lend from my private bank. Which threw me because I had never heard about this, didn't know what he was talking about. To me, I thought, Mike's got a bank.
He's a billionaire, right?
I literally was like, I knew Mike was wealthy. I knew his family was in real estate multiple generations. And I'm like, this dude's got bank? Mm-hmm. So I literally said, hey, let's go check your bank out. Because I was like, hey, I'm here. I got to see this bank. I want to be able to kind of go into the Mike's bank. And he said, no, I don't have a bank. I just mimic what a bank does. So he starts telling me about it, guaranteed interest and dividends and tax-free growth, to which me, being a financial advisor, I'm trying to take everything he's saying and put it in a little box. Because that's what advisors did. It's like, we know everything about finance. So he's telling me all this stuff. I'm like, Roth IRA, CDs, annuities. I'm like, got all these things in my head. And then where he really caught me is he said, so how it works, Chris, you give me a deal like this, I take a loan from my bank. So that threw me off. I'm like, a loan from why? It's your money. Why are you taking a loan from your bank? I know. But I let him go. He said, I give it to you. You pay me 15% interest. I take your interest checks. I put them back into my bank to repay that loan. And now I'm like really confused. And he said, but the whole time this happens, all the money that I took out as a loan is still in my account earning uninterrupted compounding interest. At that point, I'm like...
Mind blown?
I'm like, what?
Yeah. You tried to debunk it. I recall those stories. You were calling up Brent, that first ever phone call. You called up my dad and you said, hey, Brent, I want to talk to you about this banking thing, a private bank. I need to know more about this. The first question he said was, hey, well, have you seen and watched my 90-minute presentation?
I was offended by that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm a financial advisor. I've been doing this finance thing for 14 years. Why do I got to watch a 90-minute video?
Yeah.
And then he said, well, when you watch the 90-minute video, give me a text, and then we'll set up a call.
That's it.
And I'm like, I almost thought I was getting brushed off. I'm like, you son of a bitch.
I know. And even after watching that, I think there was a paradigm shift that happened, but you even tried to debunk it there for a little bit. You're like, this can't work. Are you kidding me? I'm a financial advisor. I've been doing this for 14, 16 years. There's no way that you can do this. And then you actually took it to your boss and you said, hey man, do you know how to do this?
John Foster. Yeah, I did too.
Right? And you said, hey, well, can you do this with the whole life policy? And he said, yes. And you're like, what? So why have you never told me about this? And what was his response back to you?
Well, he said, well, we don't teach you because already you know the statistics behind the new org, which new org is the brand new agents. He said, when you came in, how many people were in your new org? And I think it was like 25. So I said, 25. He's like, okay, Chris, year 2, how many were left? I said, maybe 8 to 10.
Yeah.
And he said, year 3, how many? And I'm like, me.
Wait, I'm the last one.
I'm like, just me. Vinay was here, but he's gone now. It was just me.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, so think about that. You're making a full commission and only 1 out of 25 or 27 people are left.
Yeah.
He said, now we teach you this great thing called infinite banking and how to design these policies the way that you need to, like a bank does for BOLI. Then that's going to reduce your commission up to 90%.
Yeah.
Now he said, reverse and rerun that. 27 start. How many are there year 2? And I said, I don't know. He said, 0.
Yeah.
He said, so we can't because it's hard enough to get agents to stick at the full commission, let alone reducing the compensation 60 to 90%. So therefore, we can't teach this or we wouldn't even have a general agency.
Hey, I'm Larry Steinhaus, CEO of Investor Schooling, and I've spent years mastering the strategies the wealthy use to grow their fortune, and I'm here to share them with you.
I'm Hannah Kessler, owner of the Money Multiplier. I help folks just like you leverage financial tools to eliminate debt and create generational wealth.
Look, that's why we're hosting Mastering the Money Game, and it's in Tampa, Florida this March. We're going to teach you how to take control of your money and grow your wealth.
And you'll learn how to invest in real estate with no money, trade stocks, option, and use the infinite banking concept to create financial freedom that wealthy families have been using for generations.
I'm telling you now, seats are limited, so register today and start mastering the money game.
Their business they have now. I know.
And I'm like, well, that makes perfect sense.
I find that interesting though, just real quick. I'm thinking though about the Money Multiplier right now. A lot, and if not all of our mentors on the team, they've been here for a long, long time. I think what I've really identified is that when you put purpose and passion behind something, people will run with it no matter the money cost behind it. It all goes back to that quote, hey, if you help enough people get what they want, you in return will get what you want. Because I think in that old mindset of, and this is just my opinion of it, but in that old mindset of you working in that old brokerage is that it was commission dollars, right? Hey, I want to put food on the table for my family, which is not a bad thing. You need to support your family and your lifestyle. But what I've noticed is that if I remove the dollar and the money money aspect of the decision and the business that I'm making with my clients, it all works out in the end, does it not?
It does. So when I was an advisor working at the firm, everything was sales. And literally, we had sales training classes.
Yeah.
Like when you're meeting with the client, like we went through the disc profiles, we went through all the things. And if they say this, you reply this. If they say this, you reply this. Make sure you take a check upon application, because otherwise they won't be covered. And there's just all these things. It was sell, 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 sell.
Yeah.
So that's all I knew during that whole period of time. Then when we started creating this, and I started working with your dad, it wasn't selling at all. He's like, go out there and teach people how to take back control of their money and how to be the bank, and they will ask you to do business with them. I'm like, no way, no, you gotta sell them. Sure enough, I went out there, I started teaching it, and on the phone, all I focused on, it was hard at first. It was a paradigm shift for me at first, because I wanted to sell. But then I'm just like, okay, just find out what their problem is. And I'd ask, and that was always a big thing we started with. So, we'd find out their debts, I'd mark them all down, how much balance was, interest, payment, and I'd say, okay, well, if we could erase all this without you working harder, longer, or taking any risk on, would you be interested in changing one thing? And they would always say yes. And then I would say, okay, well, let me run this, and I would basically kind of put together a plan for them. And then when I'd show it to them, they're like, yes. We want this. What do we got to do next? That was always what they said.
Yeah.
What's the next step? Because I never asked for the business on the call.
Yeah.
And I had like these papers hanging, if you remember in the old office, I had all these 3 papers, and it was like my little protocol, so that it kept me from asking for business. It was just this, and at the end, there was always that weird moment of silence, because I just wouldn't ask.
Yeah.
And they would just say, they'd always say, so what's the next step?
Hey, I think that's very powerful what you just said, leaving the moment of silence. Sometimes people in the sales industry, they always want to fill that silence with a whole bunch of jargon just to feel that uncomfortableness of the silence. I'll tell you, my mentor, he was on a call with a gentleman, and he was about to sign up for his $100,000 coaching program. And they stayed on that phone, him and his wife stayed on the phone for literally like 5 minutes of just silence, until the other guy on the end of the line says, okay, how do I get this payment over to you?
Wow.
Sometimes you just got to let it sit and simmer, and then people will go move forward in that direction.
I've probably never been good with that silence thing, because I'm that person that doesn't like that awkward silence. I know there's a science behind it. I know that it works. I'm not really good at it, but I did used to do that. I would always just shut my mouth, and I would just wait.
Yes.
And they'd always say the same thing. But
yes.
Yeah, I can't imagine being quiet for 5 minutes. I just don't even think I could.
I've been like, are you asleep? What's going on?
But back to it. So like all this stuff happened, and I met your dad. I started doing that. I started going out and speaking, which all this came because of Larissa. You know that, right? So like it didn't start with me just going out and meeting with your dad and saying, hey, let me go out. It started with him coming out and speaking to my RIA. Like we had the real estate company, and Brent would come out and speak, and I'd sit in the back and I'd be like, oh my God, there's 60 people here, and they're just loving what he's saying. And then and then I got so good at this because you did it so many times, I just could recite the whole damn thing. I'm in the back answering questions before he could even answer them. My wife was always like, let Brent answer the question. I'm like, but I know it, they're in the back of the room. So I was just doing that. And one day he came out to do a RIA, and this was right after the TV show launched. And he was so exhausted. You could just see it. He just looked like he had been on the road and hadn't slept. My wife noticed it before me. I guess men are just oblivious to this kind of thing. And she said he looks exhausted. And then while he was up speaking, it wasn't the energy he normally brings. And my wife was like, you gotta offer to help him. Like, Chris, you could do this. Well, you're doing it already from the back of the room. Like, why don't you ask him if you can go out and speak? I'm like, yeah. She's like, okay, well, when we go out to dinner to Santoris, like, make sure you bring it up. Oh, yeah. The whole dinner goes by. We were talking about everything but that.
Yeah.
Larissa's super quiet. Dinner's almost done. And, Brent always secretly does that thing where he grabs the bill before we even know the bill's coming. Yeah. And she literally kicks me under the table, and I say, ow. And like Brent notices, he said, everything okay? I'm like, before I could even speak, she's like, no, Chris has something he wants to tell you.
Yes.
And then that's where it all started. Instead of me, because at first I didn't want to do the Money Multiplier. I wanted to do the money school, private money stuff, the book that I wrote. I wanted to do that in conjunction with Brent doing Money Multiplier. So my thought initially, I don't know if I've ever told Brent this, but was Brent does Money Multiplier presentation. I go with him to support him, but then I do a presentation on private money in my course, and I sell the masterclass. It was a 4-week masterclass. And my wife's like, you're not doing the 4-week masterclass. It's stupid. Nobody's going to buy that. You know what Brent's doing. That's what works. That's what people want. We did it. Everybody's going to want that. I'm like, all right. So when I went out and I talked, like I was going out to speak to Brent and Terry at the kitchen table, and you had a house, but it was in the same neighborhood. We went to your house, but you weren't there. So I didn't even meet you at this point. But
And this was in Florida.
This was
Is that
in
right?
Florida, yeah.
Okay.
At the old house.
Yeah.
The house that your dad
I call it the
sold.
Pelican Bay house.
Yeah, there's been like 3 houses, so I have a hard time thinking, but it was the one that they weren't in much.
Yes.
Giant garages with
Because
the
he
planes.
wanted the big hangar. He wanted the big
Right.
hangar, and he didn't want to live through a remodel. So that house came up for sale, and Dad says, okay, we're just going to move 2 streets over. So they gather up all their things, they move over there. I think they lived there for about 6-8 months.
So
and
I was
they
there during
hated
that
it.
6 months.
Yes. And then they moved back to the original house. Because that was the whole reason. Dad just wanted the bigger hangar, and then it being all remodeled. But now they have what they want.
Yeah. But before I took off to fly out there, I was preparing my wife. She never asked this, but she asked, hey, show me what you're gonna bring out and show them. And I pull out all my stuff. I'm super excited, all these PowerPoints, and it was like that plan. Like, he does this, I do this, we go out, we build this thing together. And she literally says, you are not taking this, you're not presenting this. You're gonna go out there and you're gonna ask him how you can serve him, how you can help him build the Money Multiplier. I said, no, this is what I'm gonna do. She got so pissed, literally a feud erupted. And finally, I'm like, I didn't want to argue anymore. I'm like, fine. I'll just go out and I'll just talk to him about Money Multiplier. So I went out there with nothing, and that's where we created all that different stuff.
I don't know if it's because I'm in Buffalo and it's cold, but that just gave me chills.
Why?
I don't know. It's a very powerful story because Larissa really reminded you to serve. Because one of your mentors, I picked this up from you. You said that, hey, if you just give your best stuff away for free, it'll all come back anyways. They didn't say it exactly like that, but give your best stuff away for free.
Yeah, it was from Greg Reed.
Yeah.
And that was in one of the lowest points in my life financially. I had gone out to a mastermind at Greg's house. And because Greg was like, we went to his event, Secret Knock, and he was just like up on this pedestal, author, all this stuff. And, I got the opportunity to go to a mastermind, but it was $5,000. I couldn't afford it. I remember Larissa had to book me. Everybody stayed at this one really nice hotel, super close to Greg's house. I stayed way off the beaten path in this shithole. And
at the La Quinta down the road.
I don't even know what it was, but I couldn't afford to stay in the hotel, and I took a taxi every day to Greg's house. But when I got there, like, I was just amongst these greats, like, the founder of Pictionary, the founder of Make-A-Wish, like doctors and surgeons and all these huge names. I was just like this little peon, and I felt lost because I had an identity crisis. I didn't know who I was. Was I a real estate investor, which is kind of at that time who I wanted to be, the TV show, everything else? Or was I a financial advisor, which is the capacity of what I was doing at that time as an occupation? So I was lost. So I pulled Greg aside one of the times, the only time I got a chance to really even talk to him, and I said, hey, you know my situation. What's the best advice you can give me? Puts his hand on my shoulder, leans into me with this serious face, and he says, I'm going to give you the best advice I can give anyone. I'm like, yes.
This is $1 million.
I'm like, God, no. And he leans in and he says, give your best stuff away for free.
And then you just want to go like this
I
and
was
like that.
pissed. I'm like, I just spent all this time creating these trainings and these trainings and these, and I'm going to sell them all and blah, blah, blah. I did this book to give away so people would buy my program. And now you just told me I should just give it all away for free.
Yeah.
But that's where that comes from.
Yes. Yeah.
So at that time, if I'm not mistaken, you were working at a restaurant, were you not?
And Cracker Barrel.
Cracker Barrel, that's
And
right.
I was the real deal. I had 4 stars on my apron. All right.
All flared up.
Yeah. Everyone was looking up to me. No, but it was a good time. And then during the Cracker Barrel days, I was doing a little bit of college. Johnson County Community College. I actually graduated high school early, started there when it should have been my last semester of my senior year. That's when I started my college career, if you'll say. And then I was doing a little bit of Cracker Barrel, just kind of figuring out, okay, well, what do I want to do with my life? So was doing that for a little bit, and then I moved out actually when I was 17 years old. That's when I started to get into my kitty cats, because I never really grown up with pets. as a child. Mom and dad were on the roads, and Zach and I were doing all of our sports and different things, so we just didn't have time to take care of a dog, or mom and dad are allergic to animals too, so we couldn't have a cat. But when I moved out at 17, I got my first animal to kind of help me with that transition of being alone by myself, because I didn't have any roommates. I was by myself in that first apartment. But doing that, working Cracker Barrel, paying my bills, and I was actually wanting to go and pursue being a CPA.
I remember Brent telling me that.
And I learned that it wasn't my passion. I like numbers, I like math, I like teaching, but being a CPA, I was like, I don't think I want to do this. So my real passion is fashion design. I would love to do that. I actually toured Savannah College of Art and Design, the SCAD school in Savannah, Georgia. But that's when it really started to click with me. Hey, why would I go and rack up all of the student loan debt to then find myself a 45, 50-year job? I mean, I'm kind of working backwards in that sense. I don't want to get stuck in the debt cycle and always having to be in tune with that. And because Dad did a really good job teaching the kids about money. So I was coming to Dad saying, Dad, I would love to do this, but I feel like I am working backwards. And so that's when he says, well, hey, I need help in my business. And if you can't help me, that's okay, but I'm just gonna go find somebody else. And I was like, well, okay, well, what do you want me to do? So there for a little bit, I moved since that apartment. So then I was living in downtown Kansas City with two of my girlfriends at the time. And I had Cracker Barrel whipped, if I can say that, meaning that I would tell Cracker Barrel when I wanted to work, because Dad, I was working with him, I was on the application team, and I was doing some of the application calls, working with the underwriters, and I needed to be present during those operating hours of the 9 to 5 of when the insurance companies were open, right? So I would tell Cracker Barrel when I could work, and during those times that I was not working at Cracker Barrel, that's when I would go and do some of the things on the application team with Pops. But then it just kind of started to ramp up from there.
Was it just you and Joe back then?
Yeah.
In those early days?
Yes.
Two.
And Joe is still here. Isn't that amazing?
It's crazy.
And she's later 70s years old. She still goes out on her bicycle and goes in the winter months, because she lives in St. Louis. She can't ride her bike in the snow, so then she'll go over to the YMCA and swim a few laps.
That's awesome.
She's awesome.
Yeah, no, that was at the humble beginnings. It's just funny to look back at those. And a lot of people are like, so how did you learn how to do this? And I'm like, practice. People just somehow think that we just popped up on a stage and all of a sudden had this gift to just speak. And what they don't know is how I did. And I'd like to hear your story. I had the offices at the mall, and we had an event center. So I would go there late at night. Andrew would go with me, and we'd put the PowerPoint up on the screen, and there'd be nobody there. And I would deliver the talk, but I would do it just like there was a full audience. I'd jump down off the stage, I'd go in and I'd start talking to people, because I watched Brent do this. Like, he'd go out and he'd pick on this person. This is going to be the person buying the car. And he'd ask this gentleman over here, Jim, hey, you know how to get all the money back for every car you've ever bought.
Or how old are you? How long have you been putting money in that 401k, that IRA, that qualified plan?
So I would do this, but I did it over and over. First, I did it holding the script, like the lines in my hand, and then I would then get to the point where I would do it without it, and then he would feed me the lines if I lost it. But I probably rehearsed that talk probably 20 times. And at the end of it, I got to the point where when I was talking to this empty room, I was literally talking to people. In my mind, I physically was having conversations with people.
Yes.
That's how real it was for me. And then I remember my first speaking engagement, you'll never forget it. I was so nervous. But I got up there and I delivered the talk perfectly. So how did you learn to do that?
Real quick, what was your first ever speaking?
It was, I can't remember the real estate. It was a real estate coaching company.
Got it.
It was a room full of 15 people in Arizona.
Okay.
I don't remember the name of the company, but yeah, I remember
You know
it
what's
vividly.
funny? My first ever speaking was in Arizona as well, Scottsdale, Justin Colby.
Really?
First ever for Justin Colby's group.
Wasn't that the one I lined you up with?
I don't even remember. And I was going to ask you this too, because what I did, I heard Dad, let me tell you this. before Dad even had his recorded presentation on the website, before he got more efficient with his time, he would sit in the basement in Kansas City, because we have basements in Kansas City. I know us Floridians don't have basements anymore, but he would sit in that basement and you could hear him from like the second story of the house. And we would joke with him, Zach and I, food for money, money for food, house for money, money for house, car for money, money for car, right? And we would kind of banter with him a little bit. But I remember that Dad wanted me to do some webinars. So that was kind of my first step into it, kind of get my toes wet. Webinars are nice, they're easy, right? Because it's just you alone, you're just talking into the screen.
And you can have your notes on the
Yes.
presenter screen.
Yes, so that's where I really started off. I don't even remember the first webinar I did, but I remember I did start off on webinars and how I memorized almost the material or the presentation was I wrote down everything word for word of what Brent said in a notebook. And I still have all of my notes, because how I really remember things is I gotta write it down. So I did that first, wrote all of the presentation down. I was doing my virtual webinars, and then my first ever live speaking was in Arizona. I want to say it was in March of 2021. So it was right after COVID, because COVID shut everything down, and that's where I started ramp up doing a lot more webinars. And then Dad says, hey, we got this event in Scottsdale. I'm going to put your ass on an airplane. You're going to go out there by yourself and go do it. It's time to take the floaties off. And I was like, okay, Dad. You know, you don't want to disappoint him. I'm not going to tell him no. It's that next step of where I'm trying to get to. So I got on that airplane. I booked myself an Airbnb. And I remember that first morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. and I practiced that presentation 3 times before I went in and did
Done
it.
that so many times from the hotel room.
Yep.
Or just like parts of it where you're really trying to animate it. You know, one other thing too, and then we'll move off of this and get into a little bit more of like your family banking system. But a lot of people, you know, when it comes to speaking, you know, it's one of the most feared things. You know that? Like people, I think, would rather do a lot of other horrible things versus get on the stage and speak. And, you know, when I first started speaking, it was practice, like you're mentioning. But I got to a point where, like, my wife is so critical. So she would, like, watch me present, and she'd be like, I can't remember what, you're doing the judo thing, because I would do this from stage, or you're walking and pacing, you look like you're nervous pacing, or you're screaming at the audience, like you're talking too loud. So, like, we agreed that I would go get speaking coaching. Okay. So there was this event out in California, so I flew all the way out to California for this 2-day speaking thing. It was phenomenal. The guy had this like weird thing. He had an empty plastic bottle, which you can imagine. He took the cap off. So when you would go up there and talk, if you did something wrong, if you were pacing, judo, chopping, because you told him all the problems you're having, he would take the thing and just do this. So you heard it, so that like triggered, oh my God, don't do that again. Yeah. Or if you said but, or if you said, you know, any of the words you're not supposed to.
Now, I say now a lot.
So like if you repeat yourself, you would do that. So that was the first one, and that got me much better, but it was just better in terms of like the wording. Then I hired Dennis Cummings, who I used to watch Dennis speak on stages in the real estate space. He was phenomenal. And I hired him. It was a lot of money, 10 grand. And I did not have 10 grand, but I spent it. He flew in for 2 days, and we spent 2 days just rehearsing the speech. But what he taught me, and that was so uncomfortable, he taught me about like how to hold yourself from stage, how to engage the audience, different key words to say that brings the audience in, pausing. Like I never knew like from stage, pausing is a powerful thing.
Yes.
Or transition. Let me pause. Let's transition. You know, those different things to get people's minds to a different place, and then you bring them right back to where they were. Like all these techniques, and that was probably the single most valuable thing for my development as a speaker was like that stuff. Nothing to do with speaking at all. It was all body language, different ways to say things, and to how to pull an audience into your talk.
Yes. It's funny because I feel like I'm on that journey right now. I'm still a young girl, 25 years old. I've accomplished a lot in my life, and I talk all about it in my book, The Single Millionaire Chick, which is now out on Kindle on Amazon. But my speaking, I've never had a speaking coach. People ask me that a lot. My speaking coach was my dad. I literally just mimicked and imitated exactly what he was doing. Used all of his same jokes, all of the scripted material, that's all from him. And so I would say my biggest one is finding out who is Hannah Kessler. Going on that journey of self-discovery has really developed me as a better speaker, I would say. And I think a lot of people need to work on themselves, a daily practice, in my opinion. So,
which is interesting because life changes, and I know your book and the way you hold yourself out, the single millionaire chick. And I know I said to you yesterday, I said, so what happens when you're not single anymore? Like
the married millionaire chick, Chris.
I know, I never thought about that transition. Maybe that is a little easier, but at first I'm like, I got her. You can't be single millionaire chick because then you're not going to be single forever.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So let's transition a little bit, and let's talk about how your family has built their banking system, which I know at first when I heard about this, I actually felt bad for you. Now, your first house, that was in Port Orange, okay, in Spruce Creek, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it?
No. My first house when I moved to Florida, it was in Daytona Beach. Port Orange is right next to Daytona Beach. I live right on the line there. But I moved down, I remember this, I had an ex-boyfriend at the time that I literally moved down from Kansas City to Florida. Don't ask me how Dad approved that. I think his mind,
didn't.
He didn't approve it. I think his mindset is, well, she's over 18, what can I do about it?
It's not my job to keep you alive anymore. I think
Yes.
that's probably what he was thinking.
And we bought that house. It's in Pelican Bay is the community. It was a very nice community. It was a gated community, and it was in the back, and I had a duplex. So on the other side, Charlie and his wife, Dorothy, were my neighbors, and it was a 2-bed, 2-bath, I would say a little less than 2,000 square foot.
But you owned it.
And I owned it, yep. 1-car garage. It was perfect for just moving out of Kansas City, living on my own, buying my first house,
How old
no
were you
longer
at that time?
renting. I was 19, excuse
Perfect.
me.
Stop there.
Yeah.
The audience is listening to this thinking, wait a second, you bought your first house, this duplex, at 18. How? Because most 18-year-olds, even 19-year-olds, there's no way they could go to the bank and get a loan. Maybe, but rare. And they're just thinking, Daddy must have just given you the house. They're thinking silver spoon. They're like, oh, she grew up, with a wealthy family, and they're just giving her everything. But that's not the case.
No.
How did you buy that first house?
And I'll get into that. Let me tell you too, I had some trauma around that during my high school years because Dad is into aviation. My brother now is too. I come from a family of pilots and aviation enthusiasts. And even in high school in Kansas City, people saw that we had those airplanes, and it was just like a small, what are they called, 162s, right? Just a 4-seater 162 that Dad would take us to just the next town over. There'd be a breakfast place that we'd go spend our Saturday mornings at, fly over there, and then fly back home. And I had some trauma around that because people didn't know that Dad was a chiropractor. He had the offices. Oh, she's just a rich bitch. Right? So I had a
that's
little,
probably what the audience is thinking here, or going to start to think as we continue this.
I know. And if you know Brent Kessler, hell no, he does not just give his stuff out for free. So what happened is that Dad had his policies, and he took a loan from his policy to buy the house in cash. I want to say back at the time it was $150,000 to buy the house. We did a little bit of renovations into it, so doing that, I want to say he put another like 20 or 30 into it. So let's call it maybe $180,000 was the total purchase price of everything with the renovations. But he pulled out the cash from his policies, bought it in cash. And so now what Dad did is he had a loan arrangement with me, almost like a mortgage holder. So he held my mortgage. I owned the house. I was on the deed.
So he literally filed a mortgage on your house?
Yes. He always does, even if it's not.
No, I know. I'm just trying to make sure the audience knows that, like, Dad didn't just, like, buy the house for you.
No. He files that with, the county?
Yeah.
Yes. So he filed that. And then what I did every month is I was paying Dad my monthly mortgage payments. Now, Dad does charge interest because he understands money.
Well, before we get into the interest, what was the year that you bought this house? I just want to try to preface the interest rate that you could have got a loan from a bank.
2018.
So 2018. So in 2018, you probably could have got a loan from a bank, 5.5% maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we did the transaction, And then every month now, I'm paying my monthly payments to him, and I don't skip a beat in doing it because he always tells me, hey, I love you, but this is just business. So he charges me a 13% interest on that mortgage of that first house.
So you could have got a mortgage at a bank for, let's say 6 or 7% because of your age, if you could have got a mortgage, and he's charging you 13%.
That's it. And some parents will say, well, that's just mean. That's not nice. I even have family members that will just give their kids like their cars. Hey, I need a new car, so how about you just take over mine? I hate that. So that kind of goes against the Austrian school of thought, in my opinion. But why he does that is because dad is a lender. That's what he likes to do in his investment life. And he has people knocking at his door saying, hey, Brent, lend your money to me. I'll pay you no less than 16, 18% on that money. So he calls it the family discount being 13%. But here's the whole mentality behind it. If you really understand privatized banking and keeping the money in the family, the vehicle that we're using, it's not rocket science, it's a whole life insurance policy. That's all that it is. The only thing that we do different over here and when we're designing the policies is just structuring it to have that immediate high cash value. That's all that we do different. But at the end of the day, it's a whole life insurance policy. So what he was doing is when I would pay him back those monthly payments, he tracks the interest that I do pay him. How much of that went to the principal, how much of it went to the interest.
Oh, so he breaks it down, principal versus interest.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes. And so what's going to happen is at the end of it all, we're all guaranteed to graduate or pass away. And when that time happens, there's this death benefit, because Brent's got policies on his body, my mom does too, all of us do. That death benefit now is going to get paid out to the beneficiaries. And really what I think it is, and we're coming up here soon to have our annual family banking meeting, which I'll even add is very important. People need to have annual family banking meetings. Make it a vacation. Go somewhere nice. That's what I think we're going to do after the Croatia trip is stay a little bit longer, go to Germany, and then have the family banking meeting. But anyways, getting off topic there. So what happens is that when dad passes away, there's this death benefit money that's going to get paid out. And he's tracking this. I have an older brother and a younger brother, and then there's me. So there's 3 kids here. And all kids borrow from the family bank. And so we track how much interest each child has paid. So, number example. Let's say that there's a $1 million death benefit, just using easy numbers. And let's say over the course of Brent's lifetime, Hannah paid him $100,000 in interest. Zach, my younger brother, paid him $50,000 in interest. And Sean, my older brother, paid him $150,000 in interest. So a total of, what is that, 300, right? So 150 and then 250. So what's going to happen is that death benefit money is going to get paid out directly to each respective kid first. So Hannah's going to get $100,000 first. Zach's going to get $50,000 first, and then Sean's going to get $250,000 first. So total of that money. I didn't do my math right, but anywho.
That's okay. I'm sure everybody's just kind of thinking of how the logic is going into this.
Yes. So those monies get paid out first, and then the leftover cash bucket there, that's going to get split up equally between each child.
Interesting. So it is, the death benefits are paid directly to the beneficiaries.
That's my question that I want to bring up in our annual family banking meeting. Because yes,
mine is set up differently, which
with
we'll
the
get
trust.
into in a second. Yes.
Yes. So that's what I want to bring up in our next meeting. Hey, is this going to be paid out to the trust, or are these getting paid out to the individual people? And actually, you got me thinking about that during this recording right now. It's one of the questions I got to start asking about.
Well, I got a little something too that might help you in that meeting. I've got it's called the Legacy Workbook. That Legacy Workbook, you've seen it before, is kind of how I modeled mine. So it's this is how I did mine. So I read this. This is Live Your Richest Life, Legacy Builder course right here. And in here, it kind of goes through how the Rockefellers structured their family banking system. You know, and you can see I got it all highlighted here. So when I was going through this journey of figuring out, like, how do I want my legacy to pass on to my kid or kids, you know, if I have more than one. So, you know, and folks, just real quick aside, if any of you want this in this podcast, what we're gonna do, we're gonna put a link in the bio. You can click the link and we will give this to you for free. It's literally a roadmap of how to create your family constitution and structure your family, basically your family banking system and the trust that go with it.
Your family constitution, I like that.
So I think that would be good. You just literally stroll into that family meeting, that yearly family banking meeting, and you say, hey, listen, I had an idea, you know, and you kind of do it from here. But let me kind of I love that model, but my fear would be if I died, you know, and both Brent and I, we have lots of death benefit. He has way more than I do, but that's a significant amount of money. Yes, I love the idea of paying you back all the money you put into the family banking system because you paid interest in, dollar for dollar, he's tracking that, you're going to get that back. That's freaking awesome because that motivates you to want to make your payments. Like, why would you not want to pay 13? Dad, you sure you don't want to charge me 14? I'm happy to pay it in because you're going to get it all
Don't
back.
give him any ideas,
I
Chris.
promise I won't, but you're going to get all that money back, you know, when Brent graduates, when your dad graduates, which we don't even want to talk about. But anyway, but that's motivation so that you don't ever want to miss a payment because, hey, it's your money.
Yeah.
You're literally paying the money back, and that money is yours.
I'm going to do a PSA real quick for one of my siblings because one of my siblings doesn't get that yet. Instead of going to the family bank,
I wonder who that is.
and he bought a new truck, okay?
I know who it is.
Yep. And this truck, it's a sexy truck. It's a big Florida boy truck, right? And instead of going to the family bank and taking out that loan of the 13%, he decided to go down to the bank because he says, well, hey, this bank's going to give me a loan for 5%. I'm going to go with this bank loan instead of this loan over here. All right, you do you. He just doesn't get it. He doesn't get the full circle of it. So that's what we're working on.
Yeah. So folks, if you're listening to what Hannah just said, I hope your family understands that. I hope you understand that first, but then you got to teach your kids that if you did something like what, you know, Hannah, you know, and her family did and what I'm going to talk about what I'm doing, make sure you get your family on board because you don't want a rogue family member, brother or sister, to start running off and giving the bank some of the money that should go to the family banking system.
Yeah.
I mean, that's almost treason.
I kind of.
I mean, I'm not just calling it out as it is, but that's kind of like treason.
We got some slow learners in the family.
Well, sometimes a good slap on the ass or, you know, the old belt trick will work.
But you know what's kind of cute though? He does call me up and he asks for my opinion on, hey, should I get into this cryptocurrency or should I do some more of this lending? And we just got to go through the pros and the cons of everything. I want him to make his own decisions, but it makes me feel good that he calls me up and is asking me those questions because he is thinking about it.
So this is a perfect segue into what I'm going to go into. So now a scenario like that, you're paying into it, your other brother's paying into the system, knowing, you know, someday all that money's going to come back to you first. But then you got the rogue brother who is not paying into the system and is going that way. So should something happen, now that remaining pool after you're all recouped the money that you paid in, now there's this remaining amount. Now that's split up amongst all of you.
Yeah.
Okay? Always need a bigger truck. There's never a truck that's too big, especially if you live in Florida. So now he takes all that money and now he just goes out and buys a bigger truck, goes out and blows it all and squanders the family's, you know, generational wealth.
Bingo.
So that's hurting the growth of future generations because let's say he has kids and you have kids and your older brother has kids.
They get married and they have all these different
opinions. And now
opinions.
all of a sudden this great thing, this family banking system which benefited you and your family and everybody was putting into it, now it's diminished.
Yeah.
Because the death benefits paid out and a couple people just couldn't get around the campfire to figure out how to do this. So how I did mine is I set up a living trust, and it took me forever to write this, and folks, don't try to do this quick. It took meeting after meeting with Larissa. When I die, I love the idea of paying the money back in, but Vivi's 4 and she's not borrowing to buy Paw Patrol yet. So, but someday she'll be paying into it. So I'll probably instill something like that. Money in, first money out, okay? But the remaining amount of the death benefit that would be paid will go into the living trust, into this trust, which then I've set up board of directors, okay? So we've got our trustees who will then determine how money is distributed from that trust. So now let's just say Vivi wants to buy a big truck, okay, and she needs a loan. So she comes to the trustees and she says, hey, listen, I want to buy this big, turbo diesel 2500 jacked up pickup truck, whatever. And they say, okay, great. Have you thought about your repayment terms? And she says, yes, the bank is lending at 7% right now, so I'd like to do 7%, but I'd like my payment to be around $1,000 a month. So then their job is to go in and do the amortization. That's going to be an 8-year loan or whatever. She says, fine. So now the trust gives her the money. She buys the truck. There's a lien by the trust filed on that truck. She's making the payments. Let's say she falls behind in payments. 2 things can happen. The trustees can literally take the truck back and sell it, or they can basically restructure the loan so that it works for Vivi so that she can make the payments. But Vivi knows if she doesn't make the payments, that's less money going in, and she's not going to be able to borrow for the next time. So she's going to be basically motivated to make the payments back. Number one, it's just more money in the pool for her kids and future generations. But number 2, it will keep her the ability so she can constantly go back to the family banking system and borrow. The second thing, just like the Rockefellers, people often don't know how the Rockefellers keep getting wealthier and wealthier generation after generation. It's not just because of their business ventures. It's because we are all guaranteed to graduate. So we will all die someday. So I hate even mentioning this, but let's say, Vivi lives a great long life. During her life, that trust is mandated in the documents to buy life insurance on Vivi. Beautiful. Vivi doesn't have to pay for this life insurance. The trust will fund the premium deposits, and that death benefit that is paid for by the trust is sufficient to cover anything she spends throughout her life. So the only limit to her borrowing is the amount of death benefit she has on her life.
Yes.
So most of that's mitigated right from day one, because when she was 6 months old, we did her first policy, which is over $1 million. Then I did another policy, I don't know, when she was 3, and that's another million and something. So she's already got a pool of money of a couple $1 million that she'll be able to borrow, but as her life goes on, the trust will just keep buying more policies, so that when she borrows, she just keeps increasing it. That way, no one child or any child of the family generation can ever deplete the family fortune.
Bingo, bingo. And that's the conversation I think a lot of people need to start having, is the generational wealth, even just the conversations about wills and testaments and estate planning. Oh my gosh, I really dove deep into that like just this past year with our mutual friend Brent. It's just something that a lot of people don't think about. Just even myself, I'm definitely not a normal 25-year-old, but thinking about, okay, something could happen one day. I do fly a lot, you don't know what's gonna happen if you're up in an airplane all the time. So just having those precautions set in place, and then also revising it as time goes on. I think that's a big thing that people neglect too, is that they don't go back and rework their plans. So that's why, in my opinion, it is very important to have those annual meetings with the family. We call them the annual family banking meetings, and sometimes you can count it as a tax write-off. But I think it's important just to be in the tune with what's going on. So that's a question I need to ask him, because I know he's got the trust and all that set up, and I'm like, hey Pops, you got this trust after you got these policies. Are all the policies owners, beneficiaries, are these all updated in here? So that's a conversation I really want to have with him. Also, I was thinking about this too. We have a mutual person that we know, and he has a very large family banking system up in Canada. He has it written out that if a child borrows from the family bank and does not pay it back, or something happens that they're being, not nice, they're not fun to play in the sandbox with anymore, is what I like to say, they can actually put provisions in there that says you are no longer allowed to borrow from the family bank.
That's what I was saying. Like if Vivi decided to do that truck and didn't make her payments back, the trust literally will stop her from being able to borrow from the family banking system again.
And you still love her. Hey, I love
but
you,
hey,
honey.
You better wise up and smarten up.
But this is business.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks, especially in today's world, where, it's me, 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 me. I think a lot of folks are like, oh, I would never do that to my kids.
Yeah.
But that's actually the opposite way you should think, because by saying that, I would never do that to my kids. I would just want my kids to have the money. They can do whatever they want. I'm not here. You are literally hurting not just your kids, but you're hurting their kids.
Yes.
So why would anyone not want to make sure that their family is taken care of when they're long gone? And all you got to do is develop your own family constitution, your own family banking system. Set the rules however you want. Hey, maybe you don't want them to stop being able to borrow if they don't make a payment. Hey, give them strike 3, you're out. Like, all right, you did it once, strike 1. You do it again, strike 2. But strike 3, we're not lending to you. I mean, you can do it any which way you want.
Yes.
Because
you're in control.
You're fully in control. And you could rewrite the Constitution anytime you want to account for new kids coming into the family, grandkids coming into the family, or maybe just something happens and you need to you're like, I didn't think of that, and now you need to change it. So change it.
Yes, yes. I'm chomping at the bit there, because let me tell you, just me being of that Gen Z generation, we have a lot of entitled effing kids. And I think a lot of it comes from the parents not teaching them about the real world, for lack of better words. It mind boggles me, all of the entitledness that I have in my generation. And I think a large part of it comes from the parenting style and those methods sometimes.
Don't worry, I go to Starbucks, I know. I see it.
And I don't want to live in a generation like that. I think it's very important to not be, what's that right word? Not incentivizing them to do, enabling them, bingo. Just keep enabling them to act in that manner. I don't want to be a part of that.
Yeah, I love it, I love it. So, with that being said, let's move on to one final thing, your new penthouse.
Yeah.
So
She's
you're
sexy.
pretty, yes, oh yes. So Hannah recently, and I remember hearing about this, I'm like, she's not, no way she's doing that. Like, it's an over $1 million, I think?
Right around.
Right around $1 million
$957.
penthouse. Now, if anyone of you watching and listening to this has ever seen a penthouse, you know what we're talking about. The top floor, you overlook the ocean. Your kitty cat can sit on the top railing, and if it falls, it's going to exhaust all 9 lives. But, so far the kitty hasn't gone off the railing. But,
No.
Penthouse. We're talking about $1 million penthouse.
Yes.
That's almost unfathomable, if I'm saying that right, unfathomable, bleep that out, for anyone your age to even consider that. Well, I guess not anyone, because there are some influencers, but the majority, 99.999% of kids your age could never do that.
Yes.
Like, how did you do it?
Yes. So, and the whole reason of why I wanted to move, so I moved to Florida in 2018, that's when I bought the first house, and it was perfect for that time. But then I was doing more. I'll tell you the 2 main reasons of why I moved. Number 1, I wanted my podcast studio in my house. I was getting tired of moving back and forth from office space to podcast space, because by the time you set up all the podcast stuff, you're like, I'm done, I'm tired, I don't even want to record anymore. So I wanted another room for that. But then also, I had an HOA. My HOA came under some new management, and we were not getting along. I had these flower beds outside that I've had for like 3 years when I was living there, and then I get a letter in the mail randomly one day saying, hey, if you need to remove your flower beds because it's against the code. You can put them in pots, but you can't have them planted in the ground. I'm like, guys, this has been here for 3 years. Are you kidding me? It's established now. It lives here now. So I got a little irritated at that. And then the biggest one is I came back on a trip in my van. So I have a conversion van that I bought through my policies too. But I came home from a trip and it was very late one night. And I was like, I just don't have time to take everything out of the van, clean it out right now because, hey, tomorrow morning I got a flight out of MCO and I got to go somewhere. So I brought the van in. It was parked in my driveway. And I get a call from one of my neighbors when I'm driving to the Orlando airport. Hey, Hannah, just want to let you know that there's a tow truck outside right now, and they're trying to tow your van off of your driveway. I was pissed.
Whoa.
So luckily I had a good neighbor that kind of raised some ruckus about it, so they didn't tow it. But that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back.
Your driveway, why were they going to tow your van?
You can't have boats or RVs posted there.
You don't have an RV.
That's what I say too. And I was being very workable with them, for lack of better words. You know,
Dude,
I had
the
a
A-team would
spot.
have whooped the shit out of somebody if they tried towing the A-team van, man. No way. That was no different.
And I got their rules. I was
Do you know
like,
what the A-team is? Sorry, let's see. See, I knew it. I knew it. So, yeah. I kind of just, I threw that in there because I knew you wouldn't know what the A-team is, but that's okay.
heard
Continue.
about it.
Yep.
Do I know the whole lore behind it? Probably
Mr.
not.
T, he's pretty badass. Yep. Anyway, continue on.
And so I had a parking spot for it. I had all aboard storage. I got a place where I park it because I get it, y'all. Y'all don't want it here. And I just had a one car driveway too, anyways, and just a 1-car garage. But anyways, I hated that. So I said, all right, well, you want to play games? I'm going to move then. So put up the house for sale, and I started looking. I actually looked at this one place. It was a house that was built in the 1920s. It was beautiful, old Victorian-styled house. And one thing that I loved about it is it had a secret room in it. You would pull the little book down, it would open up a door. Yes,
That's
and I was like,
super cool.
I have to have this. But after doing the inspections on it, and then bringing my car over there and understanding that, hey, this house is so old that you literally can't even fit your car inside of the garage. I just don't think this is the place for you. You're on the road traveling all the time. You got this big yard. There's no HOA maintenance here anymore. You're going to be responsible for that. So there was just a lot of things that led me into the decision of, okay, this is just not my house right now. Even though I love it, it's not for me. And then that's when I started to go the condo route, because then I won't have a yard to take care of when I'm on the road, and I'll have that help from the community in the condo. So I found this house, and it was just listed on Zillow. I went over there, I toured it one day, and then I think I went back like 4 days later, and I was asking Brad, the listing agent, I said, so are there a lot of serious people who are looking at this right now? He's like, well, I don't really know, but I can tell you one thing. One guy came over today and had a measuring tape, okay? So when a guy comes over with a measuring tape, I'm like, okay, he's probably very serious. So then like by that Friday, we put in an offer. I wanna say it was listed at $1 million. We came in at, I wanna say 925 or 950, somewhere around there. They countered at 975, and then we split the difference. So that's how we landed on that funky little $950 or some odd $1,000 figure. But how we did this is that Dad, again, pulled the monies from his policies, paid it in cash, did the same thing, filed the mortgage with the county. I own the house, so my name, I was going through with the people and signing off on all the documents. So I own the house. Dad is now my mortgage holder, and it's the same thing. I pay him, he charges me 13% interest. I pay him my monthly payments each month, and it just works. And two, sometimes if I ever do really need it, or let's say that I'm waiting for a check to clear, and Dad, I can't pay you on the 1st, but give me 48 hours, you're gonna get a check no later than the 3rd or the 4th. He's okay with it,
Right.
because I'm doing business with my dad rather than a banker who doesn't care what's going on in my life. They just care if they're gonna get their payment on time from me.
But I think that's really an important lesson for the audience is, the fact that your dad is acting just like a bank.
Yeah.
He is doing the note, he is doing the mortgage, he is recording it. So he's not like missing a beat with how he's structuring it, which is also teaching you, so when you have kids and you're doing the same thing, you're not gonna miss a beat either. It's kind of funny, no matter how old kids are, they just copy what we do.
Yeah.
I know this with Vivi at 4, I had her out snowboarding, and I would always keep Vivi strapped in both feet when we'd go up, like we usually do the magic carpet ride or the lifts. I just keep her strapped in and lift her up and put her on it. But then all of a sudden one day, like I thought she was tired, she unstraps her back foot. And I got a video of this on Instagram, and she like starts kicking, like skating,
Yeah.
but not skating the normal way where the foot's in front of the board, doing it behind because it's more efficient on a snowboard, but it takes some training. And she scooted herself right up to the magic carpet ride. I literally had to move my ass to get on there at the same time. But like, I never showed her how to do this, never taught her. She did it because she watched me do it so many times. And that's exactly, I know the parable there is basically it's the same thing. Your dad's going through a process. You're witnessing, watching, and literally signing off on this. So it's just ingrained in you. That's the norm.
Yeah.
Just like a bank. And I think that's important.
And I think too, I think that's why it's so easy for me to understand money and banking and whole life insurance and policies, because I was introduced to it at such a young age that I cannot understand sometimes how and why people will transact their business, because I'm like, I would never. And it's just because it's been ingrained in us since a very young age. You've heard Dad say the story. People, like parents will come up to him and say, hey, Brent, how did you teach the kids about money? Well, you know, I'll gather them around. I'll say, hey, kids, you guys want to go out for ice cream? No one says no to ice cream. We say, yeah, Dad, let's go out for ice cream. And he gets us in the car and he locks the doors. And then that's when he starts talking about money, because no one's going to move out. No one's going to fly out or jump out of a moving car.
And then when he got to ice cream, did he make you pay for your own ice cream?
He says, let me show you how I take a loan from my policy to pay for this ice cream cone. Just playing.
Absolutely. Well, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you sharing the stories. I love it, love it, love it, love it.
I want to ask you, how can folks find you?
It's easy. Go to chrisnaugle.com or beyourownbanker.com, and I'm all over the place.
Yes, and Chris Naugle, Naugle, chrisnaugle.com. So every week we're back with another episode. This one's been a lot of fun up here in the wonderful New York State.
The tundra.
But thank you for chatting with me. It's been a lot of fun.
My honor.